Welcome to the show, everybody. Christian Jackson here with Jackson Collier, who covers Arkansas for Hog Beat. Jackson, thank you for being here with me.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be here.
So, last year was quite the year for Coach Cal in year one, Fayetteville. 11-7, 0-5 on January 18th. 0-5 in the SEC, and then, fights through the rest of that conference schedule and makes the tournament. And you beat Kansas, you beat St. John's, and then it was right there. Almost took down Texas Tech, but it slipped away. Still an exciting year and a foundation set for Coach Cal to build on here in year two. So with a lot of guys coming back, I kind of want to just ask you overall, just reflections on that first year of Coach Cal and kind of what you think his process was to, retaining some of these guys that he was able to keep and then the guys he brought in.
Yeah, so it was interesting, having Cal be the coach of Arkansas because, he'd been at Kentucky for so long. It was still almost like a culture shock, even halfway through the season. It was definitely different because I felt like the program was being covered at such a different level than it had been. Arkansas is a big brand in college basketball, was in the 90s for sure and in the 80s. Fell off a little bit in the 2000s. Must kind of revitalize that. And it was kind of back to at least in the front of some people's minds. And Calipari kind of took that and it took off. Even when they weren't doing well, everybody was talking about Arkansas because they weren't doing well and because it was John Calipari, which it was just interesting to see. But, then, they had injuries, adjusted some things, and really, I think the difference in the season was completely buying in on defense, and that changed the trajectory of the entire season. And plus, guys stepped up who needed to step up. Carter Knox started playing really well. John L. Davis, Duke Thero, and then Jonas Adu got healthy. I think all those things combined. Trevon Brazil played really well down the stretch. All those things combined to go on a run towards the end of the season and almost make the Elite Eight again. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. But like you mentioned, they retained 4 key pieces from that roster. They're bringing back DJ Wagner, bringing back Carter Knox, Trevon Brazil, and Billy Richmond. So those are 4 guys who all had a ton of experience, a ton of minutes on last year's team. Every single one of them played a major role on last year's team. And I think the priority going into the offseason after that loss to Texas Tech was, okay, let's retain as much as we can. And they did that. I mean, they have the most retention by minutes in the SEC, I believe. So they obviously check that box. And then I think the approach that they're taking is one where you prioritize retention, you land some really highly touted high school prospects, and then you fill with the transfer portal what those two don't accomplish. And they did that. They brought in Nick Pringle and Malik Ewan from the transfer portal from South Carolina and Florida State, 2 big men to replace the big men that they lost. And just a ton of talented guards, like a typical Calipari team, young, talented high school guards. So you have Malik Thomas, you have Darius Acuff, and then you still have sophomore Richmond and sophomore Knox. So it's interesting how they're doing the roster building. I'll be interested to see how all the roles and the pieces fit for this team, given all of that. But I think it's the right approach given the current landscape of college athletics.
I want to start with Darius Acuff because, Cal obviously famous for what he's been able to do with freshmen, and presumptively he's getting the keys to the offense, and this is a one and done special talent at the guard position. Can you tell me about Darius kind of getting here this summer and what it's been like, him kind of just fitting in with Cal on this roster, and then kind of parlaying that a bit with DJ Wagner, his 3rd year with Cal? How do you expect him to kind of fit alongside Darius?
Yeah, so I think in some ways it's similar to Boogie Fland last year, where DJ and Darius are kind of going head to head in practice, from what I've been told. And it's not like they're competing against each other because they don't like each other or anything like that. It's very much a brotherly competition, a fierce competition, and just their competitive nature. They're going at it because they both want to make each other better. But on top of that, you also have other guards. You have Billy Richmond, who's back playing. He played some point guard last year, so he's in the mix there. You have Malik Thomas, who's going to be off ball and can play on ball too. So you have these super competitive guys, all these highly touted guys kind of going at it in practice. Darius Acuff, like you said, he's going to be given the keys to the offense. But I think what they're going to try to do is implement an offense where you can have Acuff and Wagner on the floor at the same time, where Wagner can play on ball or off ball, and same with Acuff. I think what they're trying to do is just have playmakers on the floor, have shot makers on the floor. DJ Wagner was inconsistent from behind the arc last year. There were some games he would hit like 3 of 4, 2 of 3, and then other games he'd go 1 of 5. And probably in an ideal season, he would increase his percentage by 1 or 2 more points and then reduce his volume a little bit, especially with some of these other shooters around him. But I think that's what Darius Acuff is going to bring too, because I think he's a better shooter than Wagner. I think he's probably quicker off the first bounce. I think he'll get by defenders faster and better. I think he'll finish at the rim better. But all these things, like these intangibles and these skill sets that Acuff has that he's better than, or at least in my opinion, better than DJ Wagner at. DJ Wagner has the 2 full years and going into a 3rd year, not just in college, but in this system. So you have the skill set that Acuff has with a direct mentor who has done everything they're going to ask Acuff to do this coming season. Wagner had to control the entire offense in the latter half of the season because Boogie Fland was injured. And, he had to do that a little bit at Kentucky his freshman year too. So, I think having that experience and having Wagner alongside of him is invaluable for Acuff. And, I think that's just a really, really good backcourt pairing.
35 minutes a game for Wagner, 11, 3 and 4. And then, like you said, the efficiency was a struggle, 30% from deep, 40% from the field. But once again, probably a tighter rotation this year, but still nice to have that optionality with the multiple guards. Let's get into the 2 sophomore wings coming back in Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. I love Billy Richmond. I know, he only made 2 threes last year. They were in March, if I'm not mistaken, both of those 2 threes. But I just love how strong he is, the way he plays off 2 feet in the lane. Defensively, there's an upside there. And then Carter Knox really came on late in the last 10 or so games. He was 4 for 4 from deep and had 20 against Texas Tech too. Tell me about their progression, and I'm expecting Knox to slide in at the 3 and Billy to be one of the first guys off the bench. Is that kind of how you're seeing it as well?
Yeah, I would imagine that's pretty accurate. Knox, by all accounts, he tested the draft waters, got some good feedback, and now he's back in Fayetteville. He's been a participant in practice and all that sort of stuff. But by all accounts, he's been doing really well. And everyone expects him to take a massive sophomore leap. He's just so big and strong for that wing spot. And he started shooting. I think he shot like 46% down the stretch of the season last year from 3. And as long as he can he doesn't have to track that highly, like on the 3-point shot. But if he can keep some sort of consistency there, like around the 37 to 40% mark, still be a higher volume. And I think that's what they're asking of him. And I think he's kind of like showing that he can and will do that. He'll be a draft pick next year, probably a 1st-round draft pick if he does that. He's already a plus rebounder. He's a versatile defender. He's very physical. He's athletic. He checks all these boxes. He just needs, some of the more intangibles, a little bit more experience, and then also just to make sure he can shoot the ball for a full season. And I think he can do that. And I think everything that we've heard so far indicates that he will. Billy Richmond, in a similar vein, is also expected to make a big jump, maybe not quite as massive of a leap as Carter, but freak athlete, tenacious defender. I think some of the things they're looking at Billy to improve on are more consistent shooting, especially from the 3-point line. He was pretty decent from the free throw line and good in the mid-range game, but he did not shoot the 3 ball very well at all last year. I think he only made 3 all season, and 2 of them came in the SEC tournament. But that's kind of where they're looking at developing him, to be determined if he can. We'll see. I think he'll be a better ball handler. I think he'll be another vocal leader on the team, and you can never replace that tenaciousness and intensity that he brings. But between the two of them, that's a really formidable wing duo.
We'll get into the front court here in a second, but there's some interesting lineups you can do, kind of going big or small when you have versatile wing guys like that, kind of like what the Arrow was last year. Malik Thomas, the other highly touted freshman coming in here, 6'4" guard, big time shot maker from what I've heard. I'm not as tapped into high school basketball, so I don't really get to see these guys play in like a full game setting. So tell me what Malik is like. Is he get after it defensively? Because you kind of said this in the intro, like defense is where this team I feel like can really unlock that ceiling, because that's how they were able to turn on the Jets late last year.
Yeah, I think one thing about Calipari teams is, they're going to play defense. That's kind of been, you look at his KenPom numbers, all of his teams have been really, really good defensively. And then, the whole story about modernizing his offense within the last 5 years at Kentucky, whatever. But defense has kind of been his calling card. It's been athletes and defense. And, Malik Thomas is a shooter, but he's also a pretty good athlete. And if he wants to see the floor, he's going to play defense. And I think he's enough of a competitor as well that he's going to buy in, because he wants to play and he wants to win. And if you want to play and win under Cal, you got to play defense. I think absolutely he can do that. Whether his, I don't question his effort, his, I guess, ability on the defensive end. I've watched film on him, but again, it was high school film. It was OTE. There's so many questions with how that translates to the college game. So it's up in the air. I would imagine at this point he'll be at least a decent defender in college. We'll see. Probably needs to add a little bit of weight. Probably needs to work on some consistency offensively as well. He's a streaky shooter, but he shot like 40% in OTE on super high volume over the course of his final season plus postseason. So he's gonna be able to knock down some shots like you alluded to. But yeah, I think defense is really going to be the determining factor in how much he gets on the floor, because he will see the floor. But I really think that's just like what will lead him to playing more minutes or fewer minutes.
Trevon Brazil in that 5th year now, getting that year back from that injury early on in 2023. And I remember before that injury in 2023, watching him play and being so impressed with him. And the NBA buzz was really building there. He had one of the craziest dunks I've ever seen, I think, at the beginning of that season. And just the last 2 years just didn't really seem to be the same player until last year at the end of the season. He played really well. And maybe he didn't have all 100% of that athleticism back, but he was kind of making up for that with, still obviously a high-level athlete and just a bit more savvy as kind of a veteran last year. Like he was really awesome. So as a guy who's been in Fayetteville forever, I hope he's a crowd favorite for sticking it through and everything. But what do you expect for TB now as the big vet of the group?
Oh yeah, he's definitely a crowd favorite. I mean, fans have loved him ever since Musselman brought him in years ago, and everybody's always just wished nothing but the best for him. He's had a couple injuries. He struggled at times, like you mentioned last year. But yeah, he came on really strong. And I think that was really, I talked about defense generally and some other guys stepping up, but really the turning point last year was the ability to play Trevon Brazil meaningful minutes and him to contribute. Mm-hmm. I think Arkansas only lost one game last year where he scored in double figures. Or maybe it was 2 after Texas Tech. But he was really the main factor in last year turning the corner. And everything that we've heard so far over the offseason is that he is picking up right where he left off. He kind of, not that he wasn't already taking things seriously, but he kind of kicked it into a high gear. He knows this is his last year. He wants to play professional basketball. And he is 100% fully bought in. I think last year, part of it was that it was a new system, but also I don't know that he necessarily had a ton of confidence. I think you saw some of it shaken a bit early. And I think it took a while for him to get back to that. And I think Calipari even alluded to at one point last season that he talked with Brazil like, hey, I'm going to play you and I'm going to need you. And, it happened. He finally, something clicked. He started making his shots. He started not turning the ball over. He started finishing strong, grabbing rebounds. He was really a highly productive rebounder towards the end of the season last year too, which you look at his frame, at least you looked at it last year. You don't necessarily think of him as a strong rebounder. He's added weight over this offseason. He's bulked up a lot. He looks a lot stronger. So I think he's positioned himself to really have another breakout full season campaign. As long as he stays away from injuries and he keeps his confidence up, I think he'll have a really special season.
Finished the season shooting 36% from deep and then 79% on twos, which is number one in the nation. Pretty incredible there. And you mentioned the rebounding, definitely a good rebounder, and kind of just also makes me think about offensive rebounding being an area that Arkansas didn't really excel at last year, 232nd in the country. And with Brazil back, and then, Malik Ewan coming from Florida State and Nick Pringle coming from South Carolina, two big 6'11" guys who can move and are just big bodies down the lane. Tell me about what you expect from those two coming in this year, and just offensive rebounding or rebounding together, if that's like a point of emphasis after it not being one of their strengths last year.
Yeah, I think offensive rebounding is definitely a point of emphasis over the offseason. We see that with who they targeted. They retained Brazil, and then Ewan and Pringle both. If you look at their advanced stats from their whole career, whether that's Wofford or Alabama or South Carolina for Pringle or Florida State, and even I want to say maybe it wasn't that great.
It was Ole Miss and then like JUCO and then Florida State for you. Yeah.
But I don't think his rebounding numbers were great at Ole Miss. But at Florida State, his offensive rebounding numbers were insane. Like his offensive rebounding percent, I think would have been. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they doubled like first place on Arkansas last year. So he's just like an insanely better offensive rebounder than anyone Arkansas had on their roster last year. So yeah, that is a point of emphasis because they didn't want to get out rebounded again. I mean, and come along with offensive rebounding, also defensive rebounding. It kind of goes hand in hand. They're different skill sets. Obviously, they take different things to do. Offensive rebounding is positioning and instincts. Defensive rebounding kind of is as well, but also is about boxing out your man and making sure you're following your assignments. All that to say, Arkansas lost Texas Tech game because there was one illustrative point was that there was a possession where Texas Tech had like 10 consecutive rebounds. Arkansas could not get a rebound. They were weak on the boards at times. They didn't have Jonas Adu in the game, or if they didn't have Trevon Brazil in the game, and sometimes the guards were kind of weak too, then they really struggled getting stops and like cleaning the glass. So that was 100% a focus. Malik Ewan's an interesting case study because they're going to try to run the offense a little bit through him. We saw Cal try to do that a little bit last year with both Adu and Big Z, but didn't really work as well as I think Cal wanted it to with either of those guys. They're just a little bit weaker with the ball, not as versatile. Z could shoot it, and Adu couldn't handle the ball, but he wouldn't turn it over. Z was a turnover risk out there. I think with Ewan, you get a little bit of all of it. You got somebody who's strong with the ball, who can handle the ball, and he has pretty decent ball handling skills, and he's a threat to shoot the ball. So you have someone you can bring a 5-man out from the paint, and you can run an entire offensive set, and it really opens things up. And I think that is something to keep an eye on. I think Ewan probably will be the most important player for Arkansas next year, especially offensively. He and Darius Acuff, I think, are my two that I think are the most important. Nick Pringle, lot of praise so far this offseason for Nick Pringle. He's got a professional approach. He's very strong. Everybody knows he's a good defender, good rebounder. Like that's his calling card. But apparently he's starting to put it together offensively a little bit. He's finishing at the rim. He's got some really good footwork. And I kind of expect him to be the big man off the bench, but still get a heavy dose of minutes from that front court allocation. I think they're really going to have like a combo attack there. And they're going to have to because the SEC is a big man's league. Might not be as strong of a big man class this year, top to bottom, as it was last year. But you have to have solid bigs to win in the SEC. And I think we saw part of the reason Arkansas struggled last year is because they didn't have that last year. Jonas Adu was very, very good when he was healthy, but he was not healthy for very long. And outside of that, Arkansas really didn't have a true big man. So I think the combo of Pringle and Ewan both, plus adding Trevon Brazil, that's a fantastic front court combo. Probably one of the better ones in the SEC, and I think that'll help Arkansas win some games.
A couple of really interesting things you said there. So Ewan's 14, 8, and 2 assists last year at Florida State. I think those assists are really important when you talk about him being kind of a hub of this offense, or a guy that you think is just a huge X factor, picking and popping, dribble handoffs, that kind of stuff with Acuff. Is that what you've been hearing about Ewan? And I guess, was he like the kind of top priority in the portal, or at least a player like him?
Yeah, I think, pretty early on covering the transfer portal, he was a name that I was told that they were eyeing pretty much as soon as he hit the portal. And we try to monitor as many names as possible. It's definitely different than it was under Musselman, where there's like a list of 300 names we're looking at. There were probably 30 to 40 names in the portal, and Ewan's name was on there pretty early on. And Cal and the whole staff, they kind of work completely under the radar in the transfer portal, so it's really difficult to pin down like who they're actually pursuing. Ewan's name popped up very early, and then we heard nothing. And then like the week leading up to his commitment, it was like, oh yeah, they're on Ewan, and then he committed. But I think all that's to say that was someone they targeted very, very early, and they wanted because of his skill sets, because like I talked about, his offensive rebounding, his overall rebounding ability, and his versatility offensively. All that plays a huge part in what they're trying to do with this team, I think. Cal has gone on to mention multiple times he feels like this team has guys who can go make plays, who can go get one on their own. But also he feels like he has guys who can pass really, really well. And Ewan's probably one of the guys at the forefront of that. I think they're really going to rely on his passing ability as a big man to open up the offense.
Didn't watch South Carolina much last year, but I watched Pringle a lot at Alabama. And I always would think it was such a luxury to bring like a 6'10" dude who could fly above the rim and just run, just run rim to rim and just be a beast kind of. And he was like never super high usage at Alabama, but the ability kind of jumps off the page. And it's really interesting when you tell me about the offensive progression with him, because he is kind of like a simple cell of like, screen, rebound, keep it simple. But then also I'm getting to the question here of he only averaged 0.4 blocks per game last year. And I feel like with his profile, he should be blocking at least a shot a game. Do you know what it is about him that I don't know if it was something schematically with South Carolina. I don't think he had great block numbers at Bama either, but do you think that is something that he can kind of emerge into being a good rim protector for Arkansas here?
Yeah, I don't know why he hadn't blocked many shots, honestly. I know one of the points of concern that different fans have brought up to me with the roster construction is that this team doesn't have a whole lot of rim protection as a whole. I don't think, like, outside of Brazil being an occasional shot blocker on rotation defense, Ewan and Pringle both don't really block shots. And then I think your next highest shot blocker is Carter Knox, maybe Billy Richmond. But to answer your question, I don't really know. I didn't watch South Carolina film in depth enough to know, or like what they used him as to know. But in terms of at Arkansas, maybe he'll block more shots, maybe not. I think what they were really focusing on were guys who could defend inside the paint, not necessarily like defend to block shots, because I think Arkansas had shot blockers last year. Adu and Big Z blocked shots last year, but they couldn't finish rebounds, and they got bullied. Mainly Z got kind of bullied in the paint, and I think that was kind of the priority in terms of interior defense was, okay, who are some big-time big men who can defend the post, who can stand their ground, and also can, move pretty well. They won't be stationary. They won't be slow. They won't have like concrete feet. So they checked those three boxes. I think kind of rim protection was kind of back burner. Whatever they get, I think they'll be pleased with. And like I said, Arkansas blocked shots last year. So maybe there's something schematically, like I mentioned, Brazil came over on help side rotations and got some blocks last year. Maybe that's something they do with Pringle this year to elevate those numbers a little bit. But I don't really think that was like a point of concern or like anything they were super concentrated on.
Last thing before I get you out of here, we focused on these top 8 players. Isaiah Sealy coming in, whether it's him or anybody else, is there kind of a 9th guy there or even a 10th guy that you expect to factor in here?
I would imagine Sealy. He's a 4-star out of high school. He's a top 70, top 80 kid. So, he's got talent. He's a good basketball player. He's a sharpshooter. He's super athletic. He's got great size. I think he's listed at 6'6" or 6'7". and he's an in-state kid, so he loves the Razorbacks. So you have this whole profile of somebody who would play early at most colleges in the country, I would imagine. I mean, he's a very, very underrated prospect. And again, all indications coming out of practice and out of the summer workouts and everything were that he was kind of exceeding expectations. That doesn't necessarily mean that he finds a permanent role in like a 10 to 15 minute allocation, but I think he's going to be a guy who definitely gets some minutes. And I think he will play probably more than some fans would expect. Just because he's got great length and he's a sharpshooter. And when you have great length and you're a sharpshooter, that just that's what those type of players thrive in college basketball. And I think especially in a system like Calipari's, especially with this roster, there aren't a ton of shooters. So if they ever need a shooter, I think he's going to have an opportunity to come in and knock down some shots.
With this program, with Coach Cal and this talent, Arkansas is going to be fun to track this year. The ceiling is always high when you have Cal and you have this kind of talent. So I'm definitely going to be excited to watch. So JC, thanks for coming on and breaking it down with me.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me again.